Hi, my name is Amanda Fox, and this is my informative speech. You know, sometimes I think and wonder what people would have wanted to be remembered for. Like famous people in history. You think, what would they wanted their impact on the world to be? And then I kind of wandered and thought about King Henry VIII of England. What would he wanted to be remembered for? Maybe it was his famous personality when he was younger, or his athletic abilities, or even his religious reformations later on in his life. But no, that's not what he's remembered for. He's remembered for his scandalous love life. His 6 wives, 4 of which died while he was married to them, 2 of which he beheaded, and 1 of those maybe even poisoned. But you wouldn't have known this when Henry was young. And I'm going to talk about each of his 6 wives and the impact they had on him. Henry met his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, when he was just 10 years old. She was married to his older brother Arthur, and she was just 16. Shortly after the wedding, Arthur died and left Catherine a widow. 4 years later, when Henry was of marrying age back in the day, 14, he married Catherine. The marriage was really happy for a long time, but there were 6 failed pregnancies. One of the pregnancies did lead to a child. It was his daughter Mary. But this wasn't the heir that he was looking for. He was looking for a boy. And after a while, Henry was becoming frustrated, and his eyes started to wander. He was known for having many mistresses. The only one that truly caught his eye was Anne Boleyn. She was different than all the other mistresses because, unlike the other ones, she refused his advances. She wanted to be queen or nothing at all. Being completely infatuated with Anne Boleyn and completely frustrated with Catherine, he decided maybe to get a divorce. He petitioned the Pope, but of course the Pope said no. So what's a pompous king to do when he feels like he's not getting what he wants? Well, the King of England, Henry, went and decided to make his own church and become the head of the Church of England. And then he could do whatever he wanted. He divorced Catherine and sent her away to live in a castle with his daughter Mary. It was said that Catherine died maybe because of the horrible conditions of the castle, or possibly because she might have been poisoned with arsenic. You get to be the judge because nobody's sure. Henry's next wife was his most cunning, his mistress Anne Boleyn. She was a very opinionated woman who fought for what she wanted, even to a fault. She played Henry at his own game, and for a while, she was winning. Henry was obsessed with Anne. He would shower her with gifts and beg her to be with him. Eventually, Anne gave in to the king's wishes and soon became pregnant. This was ingenious because then Henry decided to rush his divorce with Catherine and wed her almost immediately. Anne was certain that the child that she was carrying was a boy. But of course, when it came time to give birth, it was another daughter, to Henry's dismay, Elizabeth. Anne knew it was important that her next child be a boy. She soon became pregnant and wished and hoped that it was a boy. Her strong temper and opinionated ways, though, soon began to irritate Henry. And when she gave birth to a stillborn son, she made the mistake of blaming Henry for its death. And so he soon launched an investigation into her infidelities. It was then found by his advisors that she had relations with many men, including her own brother. It is now thought that these allegations are completely false, but then she was punished by being beheaded. And while she was waiting for her execution, Henry found his next wife, Jane Seymour. Jane's marriage to the king wasn't as tumultuous as the others. She gave the king what he had almost always most desperately wanted, and that was a son. But then, the joy was short-lived because Jane soon fell ill. It was thought that she incurred an infection while giving birth to her son, and she soon died. Henry was deeply affected by her death. He was known to claim that she was the only wife he had ever truly loved. She was the only wife that was buried with him after he died. And she was also the only wife to appear in family portraits even long after she died. You kind of wonder how his other wives would have felt about that. It's believed that Henry stayed single for 2 years after his marriage to Jane because he actually truly loved her. Eventually, though, he started looking for another wife. His advisors tried setting him up with Anne of Cleves, from a Protestant family in Germany, because it would make a strong Protestant alliance. But Anne of Cleves wasn't a beauty, and King Henry was extremely vain. So when his advisors were sent to paint a portrait of Anne, the artist was instructed to make her look much more beautiful than she actually was. But when they met on the wedding day, Henry was furious. She was nothing like the beauty he had seen in the picture. He was even rumored to have called her a horse, and he wanted the marriage to be annulled immediately. But Anne, I think, is one of my favorite of the wives because, in my opinion, she was the smartest. When Henry proposed an annulment, she graciously agreed. She became known as the king's sister and was given property and many servants. In my opinion, this sounds much like a better idea than losing your head. By the time Henry divorced Anne, he was getting old and was in a lot of pain, and everybody knew when he was in a bad mood. But when he met Catherine Howard, it seemed like a lot of this changed. He went back to doing the things he once loved, like dancing and hunting. But again, the joy in the kingdom was short-lived because Henry found out that Catherine Howard was cheating on him. One of the stupidest things a woman in her position could do. Not only did she cheat on the King of England, she cheated on the King of England that obviously disposed of his wives. And that's exactly what he did. He had her beheaded. Her famous rumored last words were, "I would rather die the wife of Thomas Culpeper, her lover, than the Queen of England." After Catherine died, Henry was in failing health. He soon caught the eye of a widowed woman named Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr was actually still married to another man who was dying. But by the time Henry and Catherine married, he wasn't really looking for a lover anymore, but more of a caretaker. She took an interest in his children and made sure that both his daughters received an excellent education. After Henry's death in 1547, Catherine secretly married Thomas Seymour, causing lots of scandal. King Henry accomplished many things during his reign, but all of this is overshadowed by his scandalous love life. When people hear about King Henry VIII, they don't think about his religious reformation, but which of his wives he was planning on executing.